welcome back to the channel again. Today I'm going to be interviewing yet another James. It's not the same person as last week. This James is known as an engineering intern at Ricardo Rail, and he's worked on some really interesting stuff that you'll hear more about later in the interview. One of the main differences I think this week is that James actually says that this role really relates well to the degree of mechanical engineering. So if you're here and you absolutely love your degree, if you're doing mechanical engineering, then this role could be really interesting for you, especially if you're interested in the railway industry. So stick around to hear more about that. What is your name? What uni do you go to? What degree? And what's your job role currently?
I am James Morrison. I go to University of Nottingham doing mechanical engineering degree, obviously with a year in industry, and I'm engineering intern at Ricardo Rail, but sort of I'm working in the consultancy side. So Ricardo has two sides. We do certification and we do consultancy. Sometimes there's a bit of a cross between, and I'm primarily on the consulting side.
Okay, so is your official title engineering placement?
Engineering intern is my official
intern.
title, but sometimes I go by junior consultant, purely just sort of it's in the name kind of thing. Just to make it clear that I'm not kind of making the coffees and stuff like that, and filing away. Although, I mean, there is plenty of filing to do. I've got a big folder on the floor somewhere of these engineering drawings, and I spent a good while putting them in the folder.
Well, yeah, it can be quite satisfying doing that. So what are your responsibilities then as a junior consultant or whatever you want to call it?
Well, yeah, so it's incredibly varied, which is one thing that I sort of didn't quite appreciate going into it. I basically do what the client pays me to do. So I've been doing all sorts of things. I've been working at sort of understanding ice accretion on overhead line equipment. I've been checking at-risk areas for stress corrosion cracking in sort of high-speed rail, sort of rolling stock. At the moment I'm working on sort of pneumatic and hydraulic pipes and hoses. So it's whatever problems sort of the railway industry needs solving, then sort of I can get called in to do them.
So can you say who your clients are?
Yeah, so we've got a variety of clients, both sort of in the UK and internationally. So sort of Network Rail, one of our clients, RSSB, which is the Rail Safety and Standards Board, one of our bigger clients. They often sort of look really into railway research. You've got the likes of Hitachi, Siemens Mobility. So it's all the big names in the rail industry sort of knocking on our doors kind of thing. As I say, sort of UK and internationally based. So I've worked on some projects in Canada and over in Ireland as well. So didn't unfortunately get to do a site visit. Would have probably been a little bit expensive to send me out there, but it was good to get the experience nonetheless.
So I really want to understand sort of what obviously you said it's very varied. So I don't know how you can answer this question, but can you like describe a typical day on your job? Maybe take us through your most common day.
So what is great about consultancy and Ricardo Rail particularly is I do flexible working. So sort of I have a list of projects, and obviously projects have deadlines, but I can choose when I start, I can choose when I finish, and I can choose how many hours I do in a day. So typically what I'll do is I'll sort of log on probably about sort of 8:45 if we're being optimistic, earlier if I've got an earlier meeting, but sort of around that kind of time, check my emails, check any Teams messages if there's anything pressing, and then I'll sort of go through, I'll organize my day being like, okay, I want to spend 1 hour on this project. I'll maybe spend 3 hours on this project because it's a little bit higher intensity. And then maybe about lunchtime, something else will come through on the emails, or I'll have a call with someone, and they'll say, oh, we really need you to do this. So I sort of dip in and out of different projects throughout the day. So it's been a really good, useful lesson in sort of time management and prioritization. And it's almost akin to my university day, where it's like you've got kind of different lectures in the sense that you'll spend 2 hours on thermodynamics, and then you'll go and do sort of stress and then materials. It's kind of like that. So it is chunked out. It's not like I'm sat sort of 8 hours a day even working on one specific thing. I'll dip in and out.
Do you work mainly from home then, or do you go into the office at all?
So At the moment, I'm working from home, but that is because the office is being renovated. So I'm looking forward to it reopening, because I definitely have found that I prefer to work in the office. I don't know if you found anything like that, but for me, because I'm quite early in my career, it's sort of, you don't get the links, you don't get the sort of overhearing the conversations and being able to ask questions about other projects, and you don't get sort of that team building side of it and that social side. And I also find I'm so much more productive in the office. Like I go there, and I'm only in sort of Derby, so I'm only sort of 10-15 minutes down the road. I go into the office, I do whatever I need to do, and then I can come back home and just drop everything sort of at the door. I don't need to worry about it. Whereas when I'm working from home, I'm like, oh, I could just do 15 more minutes on these hydraulic hoses, and I'm like, yes, yeah. So it's personal preference for the office, but the flexibility is there.
Yeah, James, who I interviewed last time, he called it Osmosis Learning, which I think is quite a good way of putting it. In that, just being in the environment of other people who are more experienced, you sort of pick up like their behavior and how they do things. And I've found that because I've started a lot at home, working from home, because my project was more in the design phase. But now I'm on site all the time. So I've been on site the past couple of months, and I've learned like 10 times as much whilst on site. It's been 10 times as stressful, but the highs, the peaks, and the fun stuff is 10 times better, but the lows are also 10 times worse. So no, I completely understand that. What do you most enjoy about what you do day to day, or your whole job?
I don't want to keep going back to the variety, but it is one of the things that is the real selling point for me. I think the other thing that I really enjoy, and the sort of the most rewarding thing that I found with this job, is sort of, obviously the rail industry is a large industry, and it's sort of you would have to be doing well to not know what a train is. And so I am really able to see sort of what I'm doing and how it's impacting the sort of the network and the country sort of as a whole. One of the examples that I always quote is I was coming into St. Pancras, and one of the trains that I had been working on, and had the drawings sort of on my laptop in this big file, was like sat in the station, and I dragged my friend over to be like, look, this is the train that I'm working on. This is sort of what I'm doing and what I'm getting paid to do. And that was a bit of a watershed moment for me, because I was like, no, this is actual engineering, and it's quite exciting.
It's actually having an impact on like real life, as opposed to it being a concept.
Definitely. It's not just this concept in the ether, really. It's just it's tangible, and it's really important for the future as well in terms of sustainability. Like, rail is necessary for us to meet our carbon neutral goals, and so it is an industry that we need to invest in.
Yeah, definitely. How would you say you feel being on placement as compared to university? I know you mentioned that it's similar in some ways, but how have you found it in comparison to uni?
Yeah, so I've been in an interesting position where I'm still sort of living with my uni friends, because I'm living in Nottingham, based in Derby. It's kind of, I've had a weird hybrid experience, which I've enjoyed. What I have enjoyed more about being on placement than at university is, I kind of mentioned it before, is being able to drop stuff at the door. You have your set hours. You've probably found this as well. You have your set hours, and you do not need to worry about work after those set hours. Yeah. So whereas sort of when I was at university, I'm like, I could just do a little bit extra on this coursework. Maybe it would get me a better mark, maybe it wouldn't, or maybe I should do a little bit more revision on these material models, kind of thing. Yeah. So it's being able to not have to worry about things when you don't have to, that I've really enjoyed. But that comes with the trade-off, in the sense that sort of all my uni friends have pretty much finished exams now, and they're all like, oh, should we go to the pub? Should we go make pancakes this morning? And I'm like, I've got like meetings all day, so I can't.
Very, very relatable from me as well. I like the fact that you can finish, like, having the weekend off is a game changer.
You certainly come to appreciate the weekends, and I've so relate to my parents whenever the bank holidays come on, because obviously sort of
bank holidays.
You don't really worry about bank holidays when you're
a
student.
Don't
you're like,
matter.
That's an extra opportunity. If anything, they're an inconvenience because the libraries get closed.
Yeah. But right now,
I'm loving it. It's great. You can just do nothing.
I've used one day of holiday to get 5 days off.
Oh, that's amazing.
You get really sad when you're like working out how few days you can book off with a bank holiday to get as much time off.
Yeah, totally. But there is something to be said. I've been away this week, and everybody else is off. so you don't get bothered. It's great.
I found that it's a bit of a pain though, because like I said, my project comes to a pinnacle next week, and we've had to deal with this bank holiday this week. So it's kind of been like trying to get everything done in advance, and it can be a bit of a like just crazy.
No, I definitely relate to that. We had a project or like a bid opportunity. I had last week off, and it kind of, I caught up with one of the guys who was involved in it, and he's like, "Oh yeah, the deadline's coming up. We need to find some people on the to do this bid." And I'm not sort of experienced enough to pull together the bid, but my land manager is off and has been off for the past sort of 2 weeks because he's made the most of the bank holiday weekend kind of thing. And so it's like, okay, who do I call? What do I do? So I was just like, escalate.
Right, here's a good question again to sort of understand a little bit of a story, I guess, from you. I don't know if you have any, but tell me about a time when you felt like quitting or giving up.
Ooh, this is a great question. So a time where I thought about quitting, it's not sort of a directly because of work or like sort of the work that I've been doing has been miserable. So we've sort of moved offices. It's literally just across the road. But in that process, they kind of closed the office and told us all to sort of work from home for a bit. And now we're renovating, and kind of the time that I've most wanted to be like, okay, is this really for me, has been the times where I've been isolated, where I've been on my own, sort of seeing or not seeing the members of my team and not being able to just have a chat kind of over a cup of tea or something, was when I was like, okay, is this for me kind of thing. But other than that, it's been really positive, and I've really enjoyed what I've been doing and kind of the work that I've been getting involved with. I think I'd like to think that there is a career for me in this area, but it doesn't mean that I'm sort of locked down or anything like that. And what's quite nice about having the placement is it's 12 months. You kind of, after that, you could go back and work for the place, but you don't have to. The world's your oyster, really. You've got that experience like any other job. You've got a clear defined endpoint. And so sort of, even if now I'm getting to the end of my placement, if I'm thinking, oh, sort of, is this for me? I've got the opportunity to jump off and take what I've learned, and I have really enjoyed it, and move on to something different.
That's a very good answer. I think quite a lot of people have said similar things to me, and I say the same thing, is that the times that it's hardest, other than maybe the really high stress, intense times, it are the times when it's a bit more isolating and maybe there's less on, and almost you don't feel like you're being used properly.
That is something that sort of should be said, is that kind of, because we are relatively inexperienced on the team, there are times where, I mean, consultancy, naturally you go through peaks and troughs. Like you'll have lots on, and then sometimes you won't. And often, sometimes it's great to not have a lot on, because you've got things on your to-do list that you haven't done in ages that you really need to do, like updating your CV for clients or something like that. But it can be a little bit draining when you're literally sat on LinkedIn learning, watching training courses, because you have zero else to be getting on with. And that's just how work goes. And sort of I'd say I have been very well utilized. But there's always going to be that time where sort of you misforecast kind of the workload you've got, so you haven't got stuff on. It's just the nature of work, and it's sort of, the thing you've got to remember is it's not permanent, and you're in the company to be used, and if you don't get used, it's their loss, really.
Well, I know that obviously there are times like that, but you've also had some pretty darn cool experiences that I know about. So please do tell us the story. Well, the best experience you've had, maybe the one we talked about before we started.
There's so many to choose from.
Tell them as many as you can.
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, Ricardo has kind of a certification side and a consultancy side. And so one of the opportunities that I kind of got to go in and witness, I went on site, and I went and certified or made sure that a steam locomotive was all up to scratch. So I was literally like on the footplate of a steam locomotive, and then I was underneath it in the pit, kind of checking all the valves were popping right. So that was a really rewarding experience, and it's definitely not something that you do every day. So sort of going onto depot and seeing the steam locomotive that has sort of hundreds of years of British engineering. And making sure that kind of engineering still works as it should do, was was like a sort of the 4-year-old inside of me was absolutely screaming with joy.
Yeah. They're like Francis Bourgeois.
Yeah, it is one of those kind of things where you just like, because I mean I'm in rail because I've sort of always liked trains. I'm sort of grown up with them, going to museums and having your train sets. So seeing your steam locomotive and being like, I'm getting paid to work on this is quite cool. And then so I've been I recently took part in the final of the Institute of Mechanical Engineers Future of Rail competition, where I talked about my work with RSSB on anti-icing and de-icing mitigations, which is so much more exciting than the name probably suggests. But yeah,
Please
so
unpack
I presented. Yeah, so I presented my my work on that and kind of the process that we went through to sort of evaluate some of the mitigations and test some of them. That work involved me going down to our Shoreham Technical Centre into a cold room, which was set at -10 degrees C. And so plenty of emergency hot chocolate breaks were required, because sort of I was in there kind of, we were trying to produce ice, so I was in there very frequently over sort of an hour-long period, and I sort of I got out and I was just like, I'm so cold. But yeah, so I presented that work at the IMechE HQ, which is an incredible building, sort of right in the heart of London, and sort of went toe-to-toe with some sort of amazing other engineers at the start of their career, and sort of it was a great opportunity, and there was a sort of a networking event afterwards where I got to interact with some of the real sort of heavyweights in the rail industry.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I feel like I've spoken to a couple of people obviously about this, and even though we're placement students, there are quite a lot of very kind of cool, unique experiences that we can have in our roles.
Definitely. And I think the thing that you need to take away is you get out what you put back in, because this competition, like the opportunity came through on an email, and it would have been so easy to be like, I'm not going to reply to this email, I got too much on. But like it is you've got to take the opportunities, and you've got to ask for the opportunities as well. Like you've got to be willing to kind of do this, kind of do that, because there's so many things going on in industry that like I don't want to make any of us sound small or anything like that, but sort of as long as you keep your voice heard, like you're at the end of the day, your line manager or sort of the people that you're working with are people, and they want to see you do well. So if you make sure that they know that you want to improve in certain things, or if you want to do opportunities, then they are more than happy to sort of make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say one of the things that it teaches you is to be proactive and be thoughtful about, because this is what I said in the last interview, is once you're doing this for 12 months and you don't get very much holiday, you're like, oh damn, I should really choose something that I actually want to do, and therefore you can almost carve out a role that you enjoy within your company, which is quite cool.
Definitely. Although the holiday point is one thing that definitely I've learned the hard way, where sort of last week it was the first week that I'd taken off, like full week since Christmas. Because you don't have university holidays, you're so in control of when you take a break. It is a lesson to be learned as to how much you can go without a holiday. And I reached a point, I think 3 weeks ago, where I was like, I just need a week on my own. I can't keep doing this kind of thing. So sort of take regular breaks when you go into the world of work, kind of thing, because it's it's a long slog.
It's a long slog. I think my parents were saying it's something like every 6 or 8, probably 8 weeks, you need to have a break from work in just a couple of days.
Definitely. I mean, I've reached I've got 3 months left now, and I've got quite a bit of holiday left to spend. I think sort of every month now I've got a sort of about a week off kind of thing.
Wow.
And I've still got more time to take. So cashing in now, but should have probably used it earlier in the year.
Yeah, I kind of booked all of mine over Christmas, and now I've got none left. But I actually don't.
I'm always like, I should keep it in case I really need to use it or something like that, and then I just kind of go without taking a break. I think the important thing is putting it in the diary early, because sort of, I don't know what it's like for you, but my time sort of with projects, you get kind of filled up quite quickly and quite far in advance as well. Like I'll regularly know what I'm doing kind of 4 or 5 weeks in advance. So it's not like I'll just take a week off next week kind of thing.
No, you have to plan it, don't you?
You've got to plan it. It's almost worth sitting down at the start of the year and like, okay, I'm going to take this week off, this week off, this week off, or sort of these days here, because it just means you've got something to look forward to as well.
Yeah, I think it's more guilt-free holiday. Anyway, that's enough holiday talk. And one of my favorite questions that I've asked is, what skill/strength do you think you've developed the most doing your role?
That is a great question. I'm gonna sort of one of the skills I think is definitely important in the job that I do is as I mentioned, time management, prioritization, because it's not like I'm reporting to one person in sort of my job. We're a team of various levels of seniority. I've obviously got my team leader, but I'm working with project managers and sort of senior engineers. Who all have their own deliverables that they need to get over to the clients in their own deadlines. So knowing how much to do when and enough to keep people happy as well is definitely a skill. Yeah, I'd say communication is a really big one as well. I definitely feel like I've become a better communicator. That's probably a really silly way of putting it, but because I've had to deal with clients, I've been sort of client side this year. Having to be able to say, okay, this is what I've done, this is why I've done it, these are the results. Are there any issues with that? Is there anything that you'd like taking forward, kind of thing? Is definitely been sort of a learning curve, because when you're at university, you just sort of you write stuff down on a paper, you send it, you get it marked, and then what you get is what you get. It's not kind of the back and forth,
continuous like improvement industry. Almost. Yeah.
It's not an iterative cycle. Obviously, there is sort of limits within contracts, and as long as you meet the scope sufficiently, then you're like, okay, we're doing nothing more on this. But it is kind of, you want to make the customer happy.
Not really relevant to what you've just said, but the company culture, the culture at Ricardo Rail, what is that like?
Yeah, I'd say it's really positive. Everyone is really nice, and there is a great sort of collaborative culture at Ricardo. I've got no complaints, and sort of I'm really appreciative of sort of what my team leader has facilitated. Obviously, it's Pride Month at the moment, so I'm quite heavily involved in planning Pride activities as well. So there's a great kind of, it's not just about work. I've found there is a whole other side,
extracurricular.
Yeah, exactly. Of stuff that we're all really eager on. And at the end of the day, we're all a bunch of train nerds that kind of sit in an office and work on trains. So it's kind of it's quite easy to fit in that respect, because we all have a shared common interest. We all like things going very fast on rails. So it is a great culture, I'd say. And sort of you can definitely tell that some of the guys there know a lot about what they do. Just like, how do I get hold of that knowledge?
Yeah, absolutely. Working with people who love what they do, I think, is very rewarding.
You feel like you've got a stake in the company. It's not big enough that you're just a cog in the wheel kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I'd say it is about sort of finding the right size of company that works for you, because some people really enjoy sort of being another kind of helping push this big project through, whereas sort of knowing that I've got a bit of more of a personal stake in the company makes me want to work harder.
Absolutely. That's kind of why people like John Lewis and stuff, they give their employees almost like a stake, I think they give them stocks and shares from their company. What was I going to ask? This is quite a fun question, because I've asked some of the other guys about this. How much of your uni degree, as a percentage, do you think you use in your current role?
That's a really interesting question, because I was on a call with the placements team, and they had various different people on placement. I think it was back in March actually, which feels like yesterday, but it wasn't. And they asked the same question, and it was quite scary how many people didn't use what they learned in the degree. But for me, like, I would not be able to do the job that I did without the engineering degree. But it's not necessarily equations. I mean, I have used equations. I've had to do sort of, I've checked equations for belt drives, kind of on locomotives, and sort of that stress corrosion cracking that I was talking about is environmental stress cracking, which is what we covered in materials in second year. But for me, the big sort of part that I lean on really heavily is all the design stuff that we've gone through. So obviously
Okay.
I've been doing CAD work. I've been using SolidWorks. I mean, I think it's the 2018 edition that I use, but sort of the best practices that we've been taught have come in so clutch
Nice.
over the past year, because you sort of you pull some of the models off our sort of our cloud storage, and it's just like, oh, this is interesting. Let me make a better part. But also kind of because I've got these huge big drawings of these locomotives, it's like I would not be able to read this. It's like a different language if you don't have any experience in general assembly drawings or anything like that. Like you do need to know what you're looking at when you're doing this kind of job. So sort of being able to look at drawings of trains and understand them has been directly because of my degree. So that is one thing that I really use all the time is kind of the design and the drawing aspect of it. So cool. I feel quite proud that I actually do use my degree. It's kind of a little bit of a flex on my part. I'm just like, yeah, I do feel like I've put my student loan to good use, and I am making the most of it.
What percentage
would
you give?
What percentage?
Just
I'd say probably in terms of day to day, I'll do it on percentage of days that I reckon I use my degree. I'd say probably about 50-60%. So it's not, I mean, it's not every day. I've probably been a little bit too sort of over the top in my description there, but it is a significant amount of time. Whereas other people are like, I do nothing related to my degree whatsoever.
The other two guys I've interviewed both said 5% of their degree they use in their placement role. I'd probably say mine's similar to 5 to 10% or so, just because I do project management, which is quite different. It's definitely the soft overarching skills of mechanical engineering that you learn through doing group projects.
It's the problem solving, I think, as well.
Yeah.
And even the management modules, I think, has been one of the most useful. Understanding kind of how, because at the end of the day, we're a business and we've got to turn a profit. Nobody's going to come out and bail us out anytime soon. So sort of you need to know what you're doing in the kind of the landscape that you operate in, and that management, those two management modules definitely help with that.
Another good question. What did you wish you knew about the role before you started? In under a minute.
That is a great question. I think for me, it's going into consultancy is what I wish I understood more, because I feel like I landed this job almost not by a fluke or by chance, but I went into it not knowing exactly what I was going to be doing. And so I think it would have been useful at the start to really understand what consultancy is. And so, I'd definitely recommend knowing what you're getting yourself into. Obviously, you can't know everything, but it gives you a little bit of a better footing before you start your work. It's really tricky though, because you can't, even the area that you're going into, you can't learn all the niches. You've got to learn a lot of the stuff on the job. Like there's so many acronyms in the rail industry that I just wouldn't have been able to learn, and I wouldn't have known what I needed to learn. So I think, I'd say knowing what job you're getting yourself into is probably the thing that I would have benefited most off.
Hence why you should watch these videos.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I reckon I've turned out all right. I don't think there's been too many blunders. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, in the next 30 seconds, first of all, thank you so much for coming and doing this. It's been very helpful.
No problem.
People who are train obsessed, of which I'm sure there's plenty, will find it very helpful. Is there anything, any closing comments about placements or anything at all in the next?
I'd say get stuck in, definitely do a placement. If you're on the fence about doing a placement, I would say it is definitely worthwhile, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be in the position sort of 9 months into a grad job and think, oh no, I don't actually want to be doing what I'm doing. So placement is such a great litmus test for finding out what you want to do, and sort of seeing what engineering is actually like. So that's what I'd like to say. So
that's the interview. Thank you so much to James number 2 for agreeing to chat to me about your placement role. It's really beneficial, I think, and I found it particularly interesting hearing some of the stories you said about seeing locomotives in real life that you've actually been working on. Next week, I think I'm going to be probably releasing a normal video, most likely speaking about dealing with stress at work, and then we'll be going back to doing some interviews, potentially of some different kind of roles, maybe more within the food manufacturing industry. So stick around to hear more about that in the next couple of weeks. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video.